it is cool to care about your mental health and those around you right now, for sure. It's definitely in vogue.
Or it's interesting to talk to artists who feel like maybe they won't be as successful if they're happy. Can I spill my soul? Can I do this if I'm happy? Drawing that thread even further, can I do this if I'm sober? There's sort of an endless well of conversation around that, and it's complicated.
She creates noise. She creates noise. She's moving through the world with a powerful voice. She creates noise. She creates. She creates noise. She creates noise.
Hi, and welcome to She Creates Noise. I'm Sarah Nagurney, songwriter, producer, manager, and your host, and I'm so grateful to have you here. She Creates Noise is about highlighting the women who shape the music industry, executives, producers, songwriters, managers, artists, and advocates who've built lasting careers in a challenging and constantly evolving landscape. We want to tell these stories to amplify these women's accomplishments and to inform and educate everyone about their journey. We also hope that young people will learn that they can be part of this industry too when they come to understand the journey of these impressive women. Recently, we included mentor and artist pairings of A.C. Scott, who began her singing career in her 60s, alongside with her mentor, the remarkable A&R executive Kate Hyman, who joins us in seasons 1 as well. We'll have a thoughtful mental health episode featuring top-tier industry leaders Erica Ramon, manager of Fergie, and Cathy Olson, founder of Hollywood in Mind, exploring the emotional realities behind the music business. We'll sit down with extraordinary hit songwriters, including Bonnie McKee, known for her work with Katy Perry, Pam Shane, who co-wrote Genie in a Bottle, and Grammy-nominated Laura Veltz, whose songs with artists like Maren Morris have shaped today's country and pop landscape, along with many more voices who continue to move the industry forward. There are so many interesting guests coming up, and I'm excited for you to hear their stories about craft, leadership, longevity, and what it takes to build a meaningful career in music. If you'd like to know more about me and my own journey as a songwriter and producer, you can always check out the trailer. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for listening. And please leave a comment or review wherever you get your podcasts, as it helps the algorithm to show that you care about the topics we discuss. Thanks again for being with us here at She Creates Noise.
She creates noise.
So today we're trying something a little different. I'm having two guests, Cathy Applefeld Olson and Erica Ramon. Welcome both to this podcast, as She Creates Noise. Lovely to have you.
Thanks for having us.
Cathy, you're a veteran entertainment journalist and founder of Hollywood in Mind. After decades covering music and culture, you began to see a deeper thread in your conversations with artists, the role of mental health behind the work. That led to your Forbes column, Mind Reading, and to building Hollywood in Mind, a platform focused on bringing the industry together to reduce stigma and support well-being. Erica, you're a seasoned music executive and artist manager with over 20 years of experience working closely with artists. Through that proximity, you saw firsthand the emotional pressures behind creative success, and now you bring that perspective to Calm and Collected Music Group, where you're helping connect music and wellness through projects designed to support mental health. Now, what's so interesting is together you have very different perspectives on the same issue, one from listening and one from lived experience, coming together to explore how the industry can better understand and support mental health. Again, it's great to have you guys. And I'm just going to dig in with some questions. Now, Cathy, you came to mental health through listening, as I was saying, through artists like Ed Sheeran, Jewel, and Christina Perry, to mention just a few, trusting you with their inner lives across decades of interviews. Erica, you came through actual proximity, managing artists like Fergie and Michael Angelakos of Passion Pit, watching talent and vulnerability live side by side for 20 years. For each of you, was there a specific moment or pattern you kept seeing that made you stop feeling like it was part of the job and start feeling like it was something the industry was structurally failing to address?
You want to go first, Erica?
Sure. Well, first, I need the copy of that bio that you wrote, because I think that's the best succinct, nice way to sum up what I've been trying to do myself for a while. So thank you for that. I think it was always apparent to me. I've always been sort of a quiet observer and really only spoken up when I need to. But as you mentioned, being in such close proximity to artists, being on the road, spending time nonstop, there was always something that felt like running on a hamster wheel and thinking like there has to be a better way to do this, but feeling like the industry at large didn't really share that same mindset. And so a lot of the time that I spent with clients was figuring out how to make that work within the larger construct of the industry at a time when nobody was really talking about mental health or addiction or anything in between. And so it looked differently for each of my clients. You know, for some that were in recovery, it was just a matter of building in time for 12-step meetings or bringing sober companions on the road. For others who struggled with insomnia, it was we had to just build their schedule based around that. It was often a really unpopular opinion and request, but it was my duty and my personal sort of obligation to the clients that I cared so much about personally and professionally to sort of toe the line. And so even if it was unpopular, I sort of stayed true to that through and through.
That's interesting, Erica, that you talk about, being in the industry and observing these things because that was part of your job. I think for me, being a journalist, I always say I've been an observer of the industry, but not of the industry in a similar way, different but similar thread there, where I was just kind of taking a lot in and noticing that almost entirely when we were off the record, for decades. Like this, we are in a very new era of artists and people of influence being more comfortable talking about their mental health. That was not happening, certainly not several decades ago. When I started here, it was always when my little, Radio Shack handheld recorder was off. And I would notice a pattern. The publicist would always say, you're going to get 20 minutes with, so-and-so. And often we would talk for another 20 minutes with that recorder off. And so often the conversation came around to something around mental health. Insomnia, interesting that you mentioned, difficult touring, imposter syndrome. Before I knew there was the term imposter syndrome, we weren't calling it then, a sense of that. And just, a lot of these kind of disparate dots, but a very common pattern, observing those things and kind of taking those stories in and thinking at some point, there will be something to do with this and just kind of figuring out what that looks like.
As an artist and then a manager, the acceptability factor, like it wasn't even like 10 or 12 years ago, Cathy was an artist you knew that I was working with, and he had a stutter and he didn't want anyone to know about it. People didn't know about it except sometimes when he would introduce songs. But I know Ed Sheeran had been really open about it for a long time, right? About his stutter, and it was kind of very public. It has become more acceptable that artists then later had started to talk about it. So I think part of what's happened is that it's become more acceptable to talk about issues, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's liken it to any issue out there, right? Is once it becomes something in your awareness, you start to become more aware of it and you see it and you find like-minded individuals and common folk. And I think that there is camaraderie in that community that helps artists and anybody really talk about it more. And if you find your people, then you have that support to go out there and maybe step out and do something that you wouldn't have previously. And I think that is certainly widening. The conversation is growing and it's happening more frequently. And there are more events and activations and just people who are supporting those conversations, which is paramount to moving things along.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like you guys were kind of, early on in a way, pointing this out. It has become more popular. I was at South by Southwest, went to the CMA event at the Central Presbyterian Church. They had some wonderful singer-songwriters. The theme was mental health awareness, which I was, impressed by. Nashville is not maybe as open to discussing those types of things. And Cathy, of course, you did bring Hollywood in Mind to Nashville.
We did. Actually, Jace McDaniel, one of the artists who was on that stage at South by, spoke on our stage in October and was just incredibly vulnerable and open about his journey, his very difficult childhood and life as a younger man really being the impetus for him. He's very open about that, for creating the songs that he creates. He's all about, and is very happy to share now, all about being a music artist and writing these songs to help people address parts of their mental health that aren't so well, and to provide hope. It's a real mantle for him that he's taken up. And I love that he was wonderful on our stage. And I love that he was down at South by as well. And we found, we were in Nashville in October, and I had spent time there before, but really dug in the months leading up to our event. And there are definitely doors starting to crack open, I think, among the artistic community there. And that's where we get really excited. We're like, if you just open it a little tiny bit for us, we're going to start to push that door open more. Because what you find is people, we always say, with Hollywood in mind, we look at both sides of this interconnected coin. On one side is the well-being and the positive mental health of people across the industry. And that's not just the artists, right? That's the whole ecosystem of support, like you, Erica, who's supporting the manager, who's supporting the artist. And then on the other side of that coin is the ability of these people of great influence, these songwriters, these performers and actors and industries of influence, to emanate out into the culture and spark hope. And it's a game changer. And what we realize is that when someone, like you mentioned, Ed Sheeran being open about his stuttering, it's not only out in the way popular culture, it's about also helping people in the industry who are coming up behind them feel better about their station.
I think it's such an interesting point too that you raised, Cathy. It's like, we talk about how vulnerable musicians can be in their music, but then talking about what ails them or what, keeps them down is somehow kept completely separate. And I think, to your point, like, now those conversations are happening in tandem, and that's what's changing the work to be done.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. We get these beautiful songs, these deep songs that really speak to us, that connect us, that bring out all this emotion, but it's a different story starting to change. It's a different story to have these artists talk about it. And we've spoken about this before. It's interesting to talk to artists who feel like maybe they won't be as successful if they're happy, right? Like, can I create this beautiful, can I spill my soul? Can I do this if I'm happy? Drawing that thread even further, can I do this if I'm sober? Can I do this if I'm like, there's sort of an endless well of conversation around that. And it's complicated. It's really complicated.
I used to feel that when I was sitting at the piano playing something, if I didn't cry when I wrote it, maybe it wasn't a good idea or something like that. I don't write at the piano as much anymore, but yeah, I did feel that it had to be like really painful or something to make sure it was a good idea.
Yeah, so you've experienced that yourself.
Certainly, as a young artist, the ups and downs were tough. I didn't experiment with too many drugs or anything. I wasn't a complete good girl, but I wasn't a wild one either. But certainly the ups and downs were hard to handle as an artist. I know we're talking a little bit about the neurodivergence that's not really disputed. I've known, artists that are dyslexic, bipolar, they have OCD, but there's a risk in that conversation of romanticizing that struggle, of treating the instability as a price of genius. How do you talk about that link honestly without making sound like suffering is somehow acceptable? Because I mean, it's kind of what we're talking about. Like, there's people, well, you've got to suffer for your art or whatever.
I think suffering can sometimes be confused with experience. And I have found that the best songwriters that I've come across in my career have a lot of experiences. Some of them do pull from suffering, but our life experience is a series of ups and downs and ebbs and flows and highs and lows. And, I was in a conversation just last week about picking one song that can pull you out or bring you down or meet you where you're at. And in the group, we were talking about, what is that song for you? And I was thinking about that because it is quite interesting, right? That's the beauty and the power of music, is that one song could be written about something very specific, but what we as the audience or the listener take from it could be completely on the opposite side of what may have been intended. And for a long time, I had one client in particular who, when was asked in interviews what a song meant or what it was written about, she didn't want to answer, not because she didn't want to share what it meant, but because she wanted the listener to be able to interpret it as what it meant for them. And as a listener myself, that has changed with the same song over the years. And it comes back to, where am I? So speaking to the human experience, I think we've put a lot of emphasis on suffering and torture and all of these other sort of negative emotions to inform great songwriting. But for me, it's always just been about life experience and putting that all together into something that's meaningful and authentic and reaches people.
She creates noise.
Cathy, your mind reading column and Hollywood in Mind, we've heard artists articulate their inner lives with real precision. Do you think they're becoming genuinely more self-aware or just more publicly willing to speak about something they've always known?
That is a great question. I think it's both. I'm going to go all of the above. I think that when we create space and as things are starting to change and evolve a little bit, there's room for these artists to become more self-aware. Whereas perhaps before it was like, let's not become self-aware. Like, let's have another drink, or let's push this under the rug, or it was not a goal perhaps for some to become more self-aware in that way. And then the dovetail to that is to be able to have spaces to be able to speak about that where it feels okay to do so and where there's support. I think it's a little bit of a, chicken and egg. It's a circle that starts to feed itself. It becomes like a virtuous circle in that way. It is an interesting time, mental health, talking about mental health has become, it's amazing that this door is cracking open. As I said, I think things started to change a lot at the beginning of the pandemic. We start to connect a lot of pieces here that are making this so. There's also a bit of trendiness around talking about mental health. And so I think that's an interesting conversation. Should we want to tap that about what is mental health? We talk all the time about in the television and film world and creator world, what is a mental health storyline? And in the same way, what's a mental health song? And I'm like, find me a story that isn't about mental health in some way, right? But we have to be careful about the way we talk about it and we speak about mental health, because there has become a bit of a trendiness to it, which is not always helpful. Are you finding that, Erica?
I am. I'm glad you raised that, because it is cool to care about your mental health and those around you right now, for sure. It's definitely in vogue. But that's an interesting point that I haven't quite talked in depth with anybody outside of the thoughts in my mind.
Well, it's a good thing that it's trendy, right? Aren't we glad? It's good that people are willing to talk about it before it was so hush hush.
I think trendy implies it's in the culture, which is important to move things forward. I think, to Cathy's point, sometimes you sort of risk losing some of that authenticity or meaning or real work behind it when it becomes so cool that everybody is speaking on it. But again, yes, awareness is amazing. And 20 years ago, we would say all press is good press. So to some degree, I think that holds true here. If we're talking about it, then that means that it's in our awareness and we potentially have more ability to make changes and strides in making a healthier business for executives, for artists, for fans, and anybody that the world touches.
And we're all a little crazy, I guess, also, right?
Right. We just don't want to lose the nuance. There's so much nuance to just say mental health and put that banner over everything. There's just so much nuance in there.
And I think there's a difference between mental health and mental illness too, right? Like some of us are struggling with certain things throughout our day. Others of us have been diagnosed with disorders that need medical intervention. And those lines, I think, can get blurred a little bit when it's trendy.
Prozac Nation and such, right?
It's all important. Here's the thing. It's all important. We're all having human experiences. As you said, Erica, and it isn't all the same. So you mentioned, Sarah, neurodiversity, and we know that people in the arts over-index on neurodiversity, musicians in particular. That's how we get a lot of these beautiful songs So we're all about neurodiversity is a superpower. Right? So if we know that and we want to support the art and the artist, how can we create better systems throughout the industry and around these artists so that it isn't just a matter of acceptance, it just isn't a matter of support, it's actual celebration of these neurodiverse human beings. Thank God, we're all different, who are creating this art, and knowing that this is a business, right? That the trains have to run and all of that. Like, it's the more we talk about it, the more we figure out solutions. And it isn't always a one size fits all, but it's a beautiful time to be working out solutions that are working in many cases really well.
For sure. And I think to your point about superpowers is we all have our superpowers, right? And I think we're in a time right now that helps people harness and celebrate those things that make us different but strong in our own way. And so whether it's strictly talking about mental health or creativity or just how to function in a work environment, superpowers are important and we all have them.
Erica, now, as we discussed, you've moved from managing artists to building functional music, sound designed to regulate, support, and ground people through their day, which we've been talking about. How does that shift your perspective on creativity, not just as expression, but as a tool for regulation, healing, and even daily survival?
The reason that I wanted to work in this business was because of how music made me feel, right? And I say it literally started before I was born. My dad used to play classical music on my mom's stomach when she was pregnant. So I think I was born without a choice. My dad took me to my first concert at the Hollywood Bowl when I was 5 years old, and music was always in the house. And it's always been a big part of my entire life. It has soundtracked every moment, every event. I was always the DJ, the playlist maker, the mixtape maker. And so I can't really imagine life without it. So anecdotally, I think since before I had the proper words to explain what I was feeling, I knew that music made me feel something better when I was sad, happier when I was already happy, celebrating when I was in community of friends. And so I've always kind of had that awareness. And to Cathy's point earlier about the pandemic changing things for people, I think that was a huge sort of epiphany for me in thinking about how music is consumed, why it's consumed, different genres of music from a place of, as you said, as functional, as opposed to just highlighting specific moments. And that's sort of led me down this path of exploring why certain music made me feel a certain way, or why I listened to ocean sounds to help me fall asleep, or why when people play white noise for their children, it drives me crazy.
Helps them sleep, though.
Maybe there are some interesting studies coming out about noise machines and proximity to children, but that's a whole separate conversation. You know, I'm a naturally curious person, and I think I was coming to sort of a pivotal point in my personal life where I was thinking about impact and sort of mission driven work. And again, I've worked with contemporary artists who have fans emailing them and me on a daily basis about how much insert artist names music has improved their lives. And that's amazing stuff to read because it resonates with me, but it builds community. And so my sort of epiphany came in a little bit prior to, but in parallel with the pandemic, when I was forced to slow down because, as we know, things just kind of came to a screeching halt. And, you know, I had releases and tours put on hold. And all of a sudden I was like, you know, taking walks at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, where before that never would have happened. And it probably would have been advantageous. But instead, I was on calls and in meetings all day and realizing that 6 hours had gone by and I hadn't eaten or gone to the bathroom because I was just like on the hamster wheel. And so the forced slowdown showed me that I could be as productive, maybe even more so, if I took that time for myself and just didn't relegate it to like early morning before I had to be on or late at night before I was going to sleep. And I think that really informed the way that I chose to sort of live and work in the next stage of my career, which took me to Calm and Collected and the work that we're doing there. You said something about great natural light. It is very, and being in front of you is coming in really hard through my window.
And I'm actually kind of in a dark space, which is crazy, in my little studio.
He's beautiful. You look angelic. You look
It's a
absolutely.
teal studio.
I wasn't loving the way I was looking earlier, so this is helping me a little bit.
It looks. I love the natural light. It really looks really nice. I mean, we were also talking earlier about how music makes you feel or remember things. You know, even the smell, or it brings back someone was saying it brings back the smell of things, or the memory of a vacation or whatever. Like certain songs can really bring back certain experiences in our minds. So music really has an amazing capacity.
It absolutely does. There's actually studies being done specifically to that, and how it's being used at the moment for people with dementia, and how playing music that is nostalgic can actually take people out of some of the fits that come during dementia, because it takes them back to a time that they remember. So it's really powerful.
And you were saying something about when we spoke before about concert halls being placed near hospitals or something to that extent.
In Greece, actually, our founder, Coyle Drelly, who you both know very well, had told me this story about a time that he visited and learned that back in the very old days, hospitals were placed next to theaters because they used theater as therapeutic intervention for patients in hospital. So it's no coincidence. They were just onto it hundreds and thousands of years before we were.
It just hits differently. Have either of you seen the Glenn Campbell documentary? I think it's called I'll Be Me. And it's a beautiful documentary. Glenn was suffering with dementia before he passed. And, you kind of start this and then you go downhill quickly. And his family really rallied around him, and he wanted to be able to be out on the road a little bit more and perform a little. And you would think, well, how could that be possible? And here was a man who was really struggling with his dementia. Sometimes couldn't get himself dressed, couldn't figure out. She put a guitar in his hand and put him on stage. It's so beautiful. And every word to every song. And he just was himself, like the Glenn Campbell that we all know. It's just remarkable. Really incredible.
I do know about that. I've never seen it. Something to watch. I mean, conversely, how do you think about that power, and what's the responsibility of the industry and the artist within it to be intentional about what they're putting out in the world?
That's interesting. I mean, I think art is subjective, and I think it's hard to put confines on creativity. That's an interesting topic. I mean, from our perspective, we at the label, the artists that we work with and the artists that we sign and the music that we're releasing is because we're aligned, and there are musicians that are putting out music for altruistic reasons. And also it helps people. So I think you can guide and navigate, but I don't think that it's our place to tell a musician how to create.
Unless it's actually negative, I suppose. And then I suppose it's got a parental advisory or something. But there is some music that isn't so positive, but not a lot.
Sure. And currently, in our catalog to date, there are no vocals. So we don't have to worry about explicit lyrics yet.
It's an interesting point that you bring up. So it's hard to think about putting that responsibility onto an artist as they're creating something. I feel like a lot of that comes afterwards. Like, we have an artist in the act of creation, right? Then we have a song, or we have a script, or we have a novel, or what have you, a painting. But in the process of creating, I don't know. I feel like that's maybe, I go back to Chase McDaniel speaking about how his purpose in creating these songs is to help people's mental well-being. But I don't know down in the weeds of the specifics in writing all the songs if that's on their minds. I don't know. It's interesting.
It's actually not, as a songwriter, it's not that hard to fix, because when you're in the room and writing the song, you might go, "Oh, can I say this?" Nah, I don't think there might be a conversation like, "No, you shouldn't say something like that," or "It's not giving the right message," or "People won't walk away with the right thing from this song." So I think we are self-regulating, even though you might not think so. Or even once somebody finishes something, maybe they wouldn't put it out once they kind of thought, "Oh, maybe I should alter the lyrics or something." So it is regulated by most intelligent artists, I would think. There is some rap music that's a little less positive about women, that exists, but it's the minority.
She creates noise.
The industry has long rewarded the wrong things: burnout, chaos, emotional extremes. What has to actually change structurally and culturally so that mental health isn't treated as a soft issue, but as a fundamental to sustainable creative life?
I can jump way in on this. So again, I think we're at a great inflection point where managers and agents and label support and, the whole ecosystem around artists is really starting to understand that if the human being is not okay, then the train does not roll down the track. So I have a lot of conversations with people about taking care of the human. And I want to say, I firmly believe this industry is full of people who really care This is an industry I truly believe that is full of caring people.
Yeah, I don't think we would be where we are now if that wasn't the case. So
So I want to start there. And we know it's a business, right? So how do those things come together? What I am hearing more of that I'm so encouraged about is on tours, maybe not 5 dates in a row, maybe 2 dates and a couple days off, maybe a little three and then a week off. Maybe it doesn't always work. It's not always perfect. There's so many more conversations like that. What does it look like when you are in a venue, right? I mean, not everyone is in A-list with a huge team that's setting everything up for them. We've got artists who are rolling in at 10 a.m. to a venue that they're not going to play at for another 12 hours. What does that look like for them? Teams that are finding local, anything from like a place to get a B12 shot to, oh, you're a vegetarian. We did some research and we found that there's this place nearby. So I'm hearing a lot of really exciting and supportive things around that. Again, it's not perfect and there's a long way to go, but I do feel like we're at a time where there are starting to be some actual like concrete, impactful things happening around that. And you know what? To the surprise of none of us, like it works better because when we have the conversation about taking care of the human, that's one level. Then we can drill down into how much does it cost? How many dollars does it cost to have to shut down a tour, right? How many dollars does it cost to have to stop a production, of a TV show? So it also makes a lot of sense business wise, like proactively take care of our people and everything will flow better. And I think that message, I say that in my sleep, that comes out of my mouth so many times a day. And I do think we, again, are at a point where people are starting to understand that. And now it's a matter of figuring out what that actually looks like.
Just recently, I saw Lola Young at South by Southwest. I know she had to take like 5 months off because she collapsed on stage. Had they taken it easier on her, that might not have happened.
Yeah. And she's been very open since then, just in recent conversation. She just performed at the Elton John's AIDS Foundation viewing party talking about, she was not treating herself very well. She wasn't being good to herself. And so there's that too. It's the pressure from external. And then there's the artists themselves needing a chance to take better care of themselves and needing some help. We're all about like, how can we help? Right? Because it just works better for everyone when we're all doing better. It sounds so basic, but it's amazing how that sometimes is a message that people are like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about that. And it's like, really? But that's it. That's everything and all of it right there.
Good management, right? Somebody who's noticing that an artist needs time or needs support.
Yeah, and listening to the artist, paying attention to some of those cues, exhaustion, burnout. It's lonely. It's lonely to tour. But we've got incredible, again, like there's incredible things happening. I'll name one company, Amber Health is a company that will send mental health professionals out on tour. And they've been working very quietly backstage until one of Olivia Rodrigo's guitarists kind of named them in something. And now their name is out there more. Backline just launched a 24/7 specific crisis line of mental health professionals specifically trained to work with people in the music industry. So it's happening.
And Erica, what are you seeing on your end as a manager? And
yeah, I'm seeing the same. As a manager, I take a lot of responsibility for that. And back to what we were talking about at the beginning of the conversation is I observe and I pay attention. And I think the artist is probably the last person to ask for help when it's needed because so many external factors. Those conversations about how to build days off into routing on have long been in my purview, and they're conversations that start before the agent even routes the tour. The conversation is, listen, this artist does it this way. That changes based on finances, based on goals, based on timeline. I'm proud to say that the artists that I work with that need time built in, we've been able to do that for the better part of the last 15 years at least. Everything comes at a cost. Sometimes it's more expensive to tour that way, right? Like the bus is out for the period of time that you need it, whether you're taking a day off or not. It starts with a conversation and just it's required to be in tune and on top of that particular client and to know them well. And that comes from spending time and listening and observing and trying to put myself in their own shoes. I toured very early in my career because I wanted to know what was needed to be able to keep the machine running. Singing 5 days in a row for a 2-hour show probably not the best thing. So how do we build in breaks for that?
As you said, it's less expensive to work it out beforehand than to have to cancel the tour.
It's also, you just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. It's about setting and managing expectations, like anything in this business.
And we say, be the positive domino, right? Like, be the one, don't be the example of everything that blew up in the dumpster fire that the tour got canceled to something. Like, be the ones, because everyone in the industry is kind of looking to see what's going on, right? Trying to figure out what our best practices, what's the way that we can best serve. So be that domino, like, be the really positive domino that's proactive, that's taking care. And should something start to happen, like, the tools to be able to take care of that before everything blows up. If for no other reason, it is a definite money saver. But again, I really believe most people are trying to do the best they can to take care of their artists, to take care of each other.
And I've always sought to encourage my artists, right? I think as musicians and artists, they're naturally risk takers in their art. So why not be risk takers in how they take care of themselves? Sometimes it's hard to be the first one to step out. But as we said earlier, once you do, you realize there are other people on the same page and you can build community that way too. No risk, no reward.
She creates noise.
Cathy, outside of purely the music business, Hollywood in Mind brings together music, film, tech, and media in the same room. What happens in those conversations that doesn't happen in siloed industry spaces? And why does that cross-section dialogue matter for real change?
Yeah, there are certainly specifics that are apparent in each sector of the industry, but there are so many common threads. These are high performance, high pressure, often very public, industries where people are on a stage, on a screen, what that looks like. So by design, at Hollywood in Mind, we do have a lot of intersectional conversations. And what comes from that, which is so amazing every time, is that there's just a lot of aha moments. There's a lot of like, oh, we didn't think to do that on our set, that, something that someone might be doing on tour, or vice versa, or everything from, again, sort of making sure you're factoring in certain time off, whatever that looks like, to the kinds of conversations that people are having. We also include sports and athletes under our Hollywood in Mind, but we also include sports. We include media and brand, because there's just so many common threads to the human experience of people involved, the stars, right? The ones under the spotlight, and then the ecosystem of people around them. So it's just been an incredible community building around these common threads, and then digging into some of the nuances of each one and incubating some really exciting things.
It's great to bring all those different industries together that have similarities, but specific differences. Yeah. Erica, Common Collected sits at a real intersection of music, wellness, and commerce. Is the industry genuinely ready to take music seriously as a mental health tool, or are you still doing the work of convincing people that this isn't a niche idea?
I don't think the work is about convincing, because as we talked about earlier, anecdotally, I think we've all known for a long time that music is healing. We turn to it in times of suffering and celebration. I think what we seek to do is complement what's happening in the world, right? We're not a medical institution, but we are wholly focused on helping people move through their lives and through their days better. And so that's sort of at the forefront of our mission. And with that, we are starting to do our own research to help support that. But I think I think people are ready for it. I don't think it's about convincing. I think it's about exposure and sharing. And so a lot of the work that we've done over the last few years has also been about in-person activations and sort of bringing people into the immersive world that we create, with the intention of sharing in that joy and in that functional music, as it were. And to your point, I think a lot of people might still consider some of the genres in which we release music as niche, but we see from the data that that's actually really not the case. If you just look at the numbers, I think for some, the streams will blow you away, which is fascinating, because that's how we know that people are using the music, right? Like you can't deny the data, and billions of streams later shows you that they're finding the music, they're returning to the music, and it's helping them.
It's not a brand new idea, right? Like, remember 20 years ago or so, everybody was having their kids listen to Mozart. Like, do you guys remember this? And it was like, oh wait, my kid's going to be a genius because she goes to bed every night listening to, like, there's these concepts have been, I think, building, and they've been out in the popular culture, and people have just been kind of weaving around them and trying to figure it out. And now, like you said, data speaks. Now we have more data. People are actually, drilling in and studying what do these different beats and tones and, lo-fi and high, all of that. Like, what does that mean? Because I think you mentioned it earlier, Erica, like, I think a lot of us do soundtrack our days. Like, Golden's my morning hype song right now. It has been for a little while. Like, that's what I want to listen to when I'm like brushing my teeth and getting up in the morning. There's such a visceral, amazing, like immediate emotional body waking up reaction to that. And now that there's data behind, like, why I don't need someone to tell me that that's my song in the morning, right? Like, it speaks to my body and my mind. But it's also cool to be researching this and getting that data down, because I think these ideas and these threads have been kind of out in our culture for a long time.
But it's sort of getting an umbrella. We're giving it an umbrella now. So we do talk mostly here in my podcast about things for women. I don't know if there's an angle for how is it better? Is it getting better for women? But also, as you're both building something for the next generation through storytelling and through sound, when you picture a young artist coming up in 10 years, what do you hope feels genuinely different about mental health and how it's understood, supported, and talked about in this business? So it's sort of a two-tier, thinking about like the woman side of it, the female side of it, and also what do you hope for in 10 years from now?
I hope that this conversation is 10 years further along than it is now, and that young artists, of any gender, feel supported and encouraged to follow their dreams. Because again, music has this great, amazing power, and we have to remember the humans behind the music.
Yeah, I think they're still thinking specifically about women. I just had a call this morning. We're bringing Hollywood in Mind to different cities. We were in Nashville. We're coming to Atlanta in late May. And I think there's still quite a bit of conversation and a ways to go about young women putting off having children, both artists and people who work in the industry. I was just learning about an organization called Moms in Music that's Atlanta based. There's a Nashville-based organization called FAM. Maggie Rose, who's an amazing singer-songwriter, is a big champion of this. Like, there are women who have hidden their pregnancy. There are women all these things that sound so antiquated to us and ridiculous. It's 2026, but it is still happening across these high-profile industries, but certainly in music. And for the people who support them, the people at the management level, the people at the labels, I think there's still a ways to go in terms of how we can better support our women in music. We've come some way, but we're not there yet.
That fear exists for the executives as much as it does the artists on that side of things.
No one wants to be written out. No one wants to have to hide. No one wants to, but it's like, how do you balance both? I mean, without us giving birth and having children, for those of us who are having children, that is the future of our society, right? Like, then we're in real trouble. How do we better support that? I have been, I guess, still a little surprised at how far back that conversation still is in some circles. So I definitely think that's something that we need to work on more. And
Maggie Rose has isn't there a musical she's involved with called Mother or something like that? I saw some musical that was.
I know she takes every opportunity. She's an adorable baby son, and she will show herself with him on her social media, I think, to normalize, like, yep, I'm a music artist, I'm kicking ass in the music world, and I'm a mom, and I'm kicking ass in that too. And like, by the way, to have it all, like that whole, and it's not easy. It's not easy to have it all. So help as we can help, because women, we get to have those roles, but we do need some support there, beginning with, let's not postpone, let's not hide. 2026, there are ways to work this out.
Is there anything I didn't bring up that you guys feel you want to talk about or mention? I mean, I know it's a big topic, but for our work here together,
I think we started on some really important and interesting topics. We spoke about this last week, but this conversation could go on for hours. So you might have to do a part two. But no, I think we touched on the major points for now.
Yeah, that feels good to me. Do you feel good, Sarah?
I feel great. No, it's wonderful. And I'm so happy to have both of you here. I think it just worked out to be a great idea to have both of you talking about it, because you've come to this in your own.
Thank you for getting us together. I think it was a great, it feels like a great complimentary conversation to have all three of us.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. both of you.
She creates noise.
I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Herd City, the premier audio post-production company servicing the advertising, motion picture, and television industries right here in NYC. I'd also like to thank Ann Tello, aka XO Ann, for singing the She Creates Noise theme that I wrote. Thanks for listening to She Creates Noise. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and share. I want to thank the team here, Blair Reinley, Yelena Stavanovich, Emily Wilson, and the Master of Engineering and Grammy-winning Cooper Anderson. We'll see you next time.
She creates noise. She creates noise. We hear her voice. She creates noise. She creates noise. She creates noise. We hear her voice. She creates noise.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, please consider leaving a review wherever you listen. For example, we have a comment from Tessie Schultz in Berlin, Germany. Brilliant episode with Karen Veazey. Thanks a lot. Inspiring and great insight. All the best from Berlin. Now, we really appreciate those things because it helps the algorithm. And we read everything, so please comment, send a review, and we will really appreciate it. And the podcast will do better and get to more people. Thanks a lot.
She creates noise.